With over 50 years of Palestinian occupation, an 8-year war in Syria, the ongoing terror against the Rohingya minority, genocide in Rwanda and inside the UN protected zone in Srebrenica, Bosnia and Herzegovina, has the United Nations fulfilled its pledge to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war.
You could, of course, say that the UN has failed many times. On the other hand, you could also say the UN has a lot of achievements. The former Secretary General Hammarskjöld once said the UN is there not to take humankind to heaven, but to save it from hell.
No, I don't think the UN failed at all. I think the UN is hugely important, particularly for developing countries and for Africa.
I think when it was set up in 1945, it established very idealistic goals, and it has not achieved those goals.
The United Nations is the biggest international organization. It gathers 193 nations, employs 44,000 staff members, and its 2-year budget is $5.4 billion. The organization has 6 main bodies, including the Security Council, the General Assembly, and the International Court of Justice. The system also includes different funds, programs, and specialized agencies. One of the most recognized is the World Food Program, the world's largest humanitarian agency. Every year it provides food for almost 80 million people in about 75 countries. But if you look at the UN as a political entity, things get murky.
The Security Council unfortunately lies at the heart of the system. And because of the P5 and the veto, it is like a poison that seeps through in the entire UN system.
The Security Council, quote, has primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. It can resort to imposing sanctions or even authorize the use of force to maintain or restore international peace and security. The Council is made up of 5 permanent members, also known as the P5, and they have veto power. It means they can block any decision they want, like when the US vetoed Kuwait's declaration that condemned Israel's use of force against Palestinian civilians during the Great March of Return in 2018. Russia, Bashar al-Assad's ally, used the veto 12 times to block action against his regime. Unlike the P5, the Security Council's 10 non-permanent members, who are elected every 2 years in the General Assembly, don't have veto power, and they can't be elected twice in a row. Many criticize the fact that 5 countries can't represent the whole world.
Dünya 5'ten büyüktür.
Among the P5, there are no countries from Africa and South America. The permanent members are the countries that won World War II. There have been no changes to it since.
The UN is slowly and steadily losing relevance. If there isn't substantive reform of the Security Council, the UN and the Security Council will become increasingly irrelevant.
Power structure in the world is changing, so there are no Muslim countries as the permanent members of the Security Council, and also India, Germany, Japan. These actors are providing both resources as well as personnel to United Nations.
Reform proposals differ, but they all point to changes to the distribution of power in the Security Council. The open-ended working group at the UN is responsible for the second-round reforms, but it became known as the never-ending group as it's entered its 24th year of deliberations.
We run a campaign called Elect the Council that calls for the end of the veto, that certain big powers still remain members of the UN, but that the UN Security Council be expanded to probably about 25, 26 countries.
Bigger issue would be changes in the working procedures of the Security Council. For instance, that a country which casts a veto has to explain why it casts such a veto. At the moment, this is not the case.
The Permanent 5 have found ways of playing off the rest of the world against each other, so that the rest of the world hasn't been able to come up with a coherent plan that they could put to the Permanent 5, that then the Permanent 5 would have little option other than to accept.
So, is it time to rethink the United Nations?